The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
And now, the Commander-in-Chief is back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, and we are back. Welcome back, Gulf Coast. Welcome back, America. Welcome back, world. And here's the segment that you've been holding your breath for and been waiting for. And I know that our live stream is probably going to be jammed again, even though we've doubled the stream capacity. But Lieutenant Mike Zullo is with us, and most of you know Lieutenant Mike by now. He's very famous to the Freedom Friday show. Lieutenant Mike Zullo is the lead investigator of the cold case posse, Sheriff Arpaio, on the fraudulent document issue. And Lieutenant Mike and I were the ones that went to CPAC together. We went on to Capitol Hill together. We've been talking to some VIPs around the nation and around Washington together, trying to break open a federal investigation here. And possibly, no promises being made, but we have made some contact with some VIPs, and there's the possibility that some investigation, state and or federal, will get going in the next few months. That's our hope, and so you folks keep us in prayer as we keep moving forward. Lieutenant Mike, thank you for being on the show, and I'm going to tell you, you and I have had we can't say what, and we're not going to, but we've had a pretty hectic day today, haven't we?
Carl, it's been a day like Alice in Wonderland never experienced.
I know. Hey, but one thing we know, people in Washington, D.C. listen to Freedom Friday. We know that for a fact. We've been knowing that, but today we got confirmation of it, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. There are people that listen to this show and that know our names, and that's not a good thing necessarily. But Lieutenant Mike and I have had one heck of a day as we have watched the top spin, and as we have been down the rabbit hole into Alice in Wonderland. But anyway, we'll divulge a lot of that, and in the upcoming weeks, we'll put some names and some faces and some documents up for you to look at. But in the meantime, let's just get right down to this. Folks, hear me. For this next 30-minute segment, here's what's going to happen. Lieutenant Mike and I are just going to talk about this. We're not going to take any calls for this 30-minute segment, and we had that planned. So in case you're a little upset about that, let me remind you, next Friday, we're doing a special edition of Freedom Friday. The first 30 minutes, I'll do some intro, and I've got Ted Shubat coming on. I've had him lined up for months. But then for the next hour and a half of next Friday's 2-hour segment, Lieutenant Mike Zullo is going to be on live, and we're going to just open the phone lines and let you go. You can ask questions. You can grill and drill us. You can agree. You can disagree. You can challenge Lieutenant Mike. We will not be ugly to you. We will not disrespect you. We will let you challenge. We will let you ask questions, because Lieutenant Zullo has nothing to hide, and he will tell you everything that he can lawfully tell you. There's still a criminal investigation going on, so there's some details he can't tell you, but he'll tell you everything he can lawfully tell you and answer any question or concern you have. But folks, once you know the depth and the level of the severity of this, you know, then you're armed with the truth. And what we ask is that you tell people, blog about it, write about it, call, email, get people listening to the show. We'll podcast this. We'll put videos up, direct people to it. Get your congressmen involved in this. And if you know judges and attorney generals and governors, if you have contacts with state representatives, etc., get them involved in the knowledge of this, because this is huge and it's getting bigger. Am I right, Lieutenant Mike?
Yes, you're 100% right, Carl. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to interact next week with the people that listen to your channel. I think they deserve it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And you've been very gracious over the years to give us a lot of your time. And I know that you're crazy busy and you're just jerked and pulled in all directions all over the nation. But you always seem to find time for the Freedom Friday folks, and I appreciate that. Well, listen, Mike, explain to the people that this is no longer a birther issue. Explain that philosophy and tell them what issue this is and where this is headed and what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to kind of change the conversation here. Explain it to folks.
If you go back even to the very beginning, the very first press conference Sheriff Arpaio and I held, we were maintaining that this is about document fraud. It's not a birther issue. This term birther is a categorized phrase that the media has made up to, basically denigrate anyone wanting to look into this issue.
Right.
And they're using it successfully. And it's a method of intimidation and ridicule. It's been taken right out of a Saul Alinsky playbook.
Yeah.
On ridicule, it's very, very difficult to defend. When someone starts to ridicule you over something, any defense actually just leads to more persecution. And Sheriff and I have sat down and we really discussed this at length, and, we're handicapped. The media obviously is not friendly, mainstream media, not friendly to this issue. The administration certainly isn't friendly to this issue.
Right.
And we have a big job ahead of us. And what we want to do is we want to reframe the narrative.
Right.
And this is about a criminal law enforcement investigation into document forgery. There is just nothing else about it.
Right.
It doesn't matter to us at this point in time where anybody was born.
Right. And
it's a fraudulent document.
Yeah. And let me just speak some things, my understanding of it. And again, as always, Lieutenant Zullo, if I say anything that's incorrect, you correct it right here. It won't hurt my feelings. I want you to do that. But let me just say, I want to put an exclamation point on what Lieutenant Mike just said. At this point, we really don't care where he was born. Now hear me. I do care, and it does go to the Constitution. But this issue that we're bringing forth, and the reason we went to CPAC and the reason we went to Capitol Hill, is not at this point necessarily about where he was born. See, we could find out that he was born right here in the United States, and we could find out, I doubt it, but we could find out that both of his parents were American citizens at the time of his birth, which makes him natural born. We could find all that out. The problem is the document, the only identifying document that he and the White House have ever brought forward as his identifying document, has now been proven in a 15-month criminal investigation, signed off by digital document experts who are certified to testify in federal court. Now it has been determined that the only document he's ever proffered is a fabrication. It's a forgery. It's a fake, which is a felony and a federal crime. And then that goes to two more important questions. Number one, who did it? And number two, why? Why would the President of the United States have to present a fabricated document as his only form of identification? Did I articulate that correctly?
I don't think I could have done it any better myself.
Well, I've given that speech so many times. How many times did you hear me say that at CPAC and on Capitol Hill? I mean, over and over and over. Sometimes I dream giving that speech, but it's just truth. And Mike, you and I have talked about this. I can always hold my head up, and so can you, and so can Sheriff Arpaio, no matter which way this falls. I mean, even if it's completely ignored, because number one, the truth is going to come out on this, even if it's 20 years from now. I mean, history always has a way of bringing truth to the top. The truth will come out, and all you and I are dealing in are facts, and all we want is the truth. And if something came into your office tomorrow that proved everything you have is no good and that he is perfectly legitimate, you would tell it, wouldn't you?
That was the risk I ran in the very beginning. I mean, there could be anything. I think I said it in the very beginning of our investigation. We could be working a year, 2 years, 3 years on this, and then all of a sudden one piece of information comes in and neutralizes everything we worked on, because it's a game changer.
Right.
Except I don't believe there's going to be a game changer.
Well, it doesn't look like it, because the preponderance of evidence you have thus far makes it almost impossible that there will be a game changer. But you are honest enough, and I am honest enough to say that if the game changer comes in, we will report it, and we will acknowledge it, and we will expose it, correct?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Absolutely. All I have ever wanted in this. And folks, by the way, I kind of started on this before the Zullo investigation started, before the Arpaio investigation started. So I've been at this for a long time. I tell you what, Mike, let's do this. Let's take a break. We've got to take a break right now. And when we come back, let's tell the folks about the Lieutenant Colonel Allen West situation, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, good deal. Folks, you're listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops. Lieutenant Mike Zullo, our guest today. We've got a lot more stuff to give you. We'll be right back.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
How can one man bother so many people by simply telling the truth? Freedom Friday with Gallops, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, welcome back, America. And so we're back. Lieutenant Mike Zullo, so you and I were at CPAC and on Capitol Hill, but we ran into a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, who you and I both think a lot of as far as his past and his military service. But we were a little disappointed in his reaction to the legal law enforcement evidence that was presented. Tell the folks what happened with that.
Well, basically, we did run into him. We ran into him one night at dinner, and we asked for a meeting, and he said he would meet with us during the CPAC convention. We tried numerous times to get in touch with him with no return call, and you and I happened to be walking down a corridor, and he was coming through. And again, he said that he would meet with us. And as fate would have it, I was walking back in an opposite direction about an hour later and ran right into him, and was fortunate enough to get about 5 minutes. We tucked into a small, almost like utility passway to another part of the building, and we had a conversation. And I explained to him who I was. I explained to him what we were doing. He was aware of what we were doing. And, I went to Colonel West in the highest regard. I mean, here's a man who's got the Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medals, military accommodations. I mean, the guy dodges bullets.
Right.
And I went there knowing that he was a Tea Party favorite. And I asked him for a very simple request. I asked him that in the event that I was blessed enough to get an individual, and I'm just going to use the term individual, to step forward and bring this issue to the forefront, would you look at my evidence and support this individual's play? And to my surprise, he looked at me and said, no. And I look back, I go, Colonel, I'm sitting on a felony. And he said to me that he would rather spend the political capital going after Benghazi because Mr. Obama is the commander-in-chief.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at him right in the eye and I said, but Colonel, he is the commander-in-chief. And I, as a law enforcement officer, cannot tell you who he is.
Right.
And we had a dead stare for a moment. I said, I am not asking you to do anything. I am not asking you to pick up my mantle and march with it. I am merely asking, will you look at the evidence and help us? And he responded to me that they will label you with a tinfoil hat. And I promptly said, well, I'm not one of those people. This is the sheriff's office. We're a law enforcement agency. We've done 1.5 years of investigative work, and we have the evidence. He looked back at me, and he said, I may want to run again politically myself, and I don't know if I want to get labeled with this. I said, well, you really wouldn't be getting labeled anything once I bring you the evidence, and I'm not asking you to go out. I'm asking you to merely support the effort. And he turned as he was walking away and basically goes, I would really have to think about that, but I don't think so. And that was the end of the conversation. His aides shuffled him away when they, saw that he wanted to get out of there.
And folks, there's your conservative Tea Party hero, Colonel Allen West, who basically said, now I'm going to use other words, but this was his basic message. This felony 1.5 year criminal investigation with the chief law enforcement officer under Arpaio, who's the chief law enforcement officer, but the chief man, the chief investigator under Arpaio, standing in front of you saying, I don't have a tinfoil hat. I'm a cop. We've done 1.5 year investigation. We've got the evidence. We've got the felony. We've got the goods. We've got people signed off on it that are certified to testify in federal court. I'm not a nut. I'm a cop, sir. Look at me. I'm a cop. Okay? We have got a felony committed in the White House. We've got a federal crime committed in the White House. And Colonel Allen West basically said, that's not politically expedient for me. I might want to run for office later. So, and he did not say this, but I'm going to put these words in his mouth. So I'm pretty much willing to sell the country down the road right now so I can win a little 2-year term as a congressman later. That's pretty much what he said. Folks, and we wonder what's wrong with America. That's a colonel who Mike and I have great respect for, or at least, we did. And pray for us. And now we've got some men that are standing up and standing with us, but when you run into men like that you thought were one of your heroes, and as you just heard Lieutenant Zullo say, he didn't ask Colonel West to stick out his chest and take up our mantle and do anything other than just, if somebody else comes forward with it, because we've got a couple of people who are claiming they will, would you kind of stand beside them and stand behind them on this issue? Would you kind of bolster them up? Would you just say, hey, let's support this law enforcement investigation? And Colonel West said, no, I will not. Lieutenant Zullo, take it from there.
Well, Carl, I think it really drove home the point for me. And please let me say this. I know people are frustrated. I don't want them pursuing Colonel North and Holly North. I'm thinking about
Colonel
West and
don't do that.
And doing those kinds of things. I know everybody's frustrated, and look, there's always a chance that he does give it some thought.
Right. He might come around.
Am I counting on that?
Yeah.
No, but it could happen.
Right.
But here's what it really came down to for me: the birther Monica, the media, has put the fear of ridicule deep into the heart of our elected or even formerly elected officials.
Yeah.
They don't want to get labeled
as
being a wingnut.
Right.
And the reality is that the people that have been chasing this far longer than I have are going to be proven correct.
Correct. That's right.
We are now at a crossroad in this country where we are now giving away one of our foundational principles of the rule of law. When you can turn your cheek and look the other way when someone is violating a law out of the highest office in the land, all is lost.
Yeah.
And if you go back in history, Richard Nixon was taken out of office for the lying cover-up.
Right.
And this is going to be a cover-up.
Yeah. And the magnitude of this is 100 times greater than the Watergate cover-up, because it goes directly to who is the commander-in-chief, national security, and the destruction of our Constitution.
And Carl, there's other commentators out there like Glenn Beck that goes out saying he's never said the document isn't a forgery. He's saying that this was some kind of ruse done by the president just to tick off birthers. I've never heard such twisted logic like that.
It's foolish.
Do you want me to really believe the commander-in-chief of the greatest nation on earth has nothing better to do than to play a game with us?
And forge documents?
If he did that, he broke federal and state laws doing it by offering up a phony birth certificate.
Yep.
You can't do that. If you and I did that, we forged a document and received some kind of gain for it, some advantage for us, we would be arrested and prosecuted.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what we're fighting. That's what we're fighting here.
Yeah, and that's a perfect explanation of it. So this is not a birther issue. Now we're dealing with a legal, law enforcement, felony, federal, forgery, fabrication, fraud issue. All the F words there, but those are good F words. But that's what we're dealing with. Now, listen, we're quickly running out of time. So 2 questions I want you to answer for our audience now. And folks, don't forget, next week, an hour and a half of Lieutenant Mike Zullo, and we're going to open up the phone lines. It'll be you and Lieutenant Zullo for an hour and a half next Friday. So you tune in. 2 questions I want you to answer. Number 1, kind of what's next? Where are we headed with this? And number 2, I know that you do everything, the Cold Case Posse does everything by donations, because you're not using taxpayer dollars for this, and which infuriates the left. They'd love to be able to say you're using taxpayer dollars for this, but you're not. So how can people donate? How can people give? And what's next? Why should people give? Why should people give? What is anything going to happen? What do you think?
Well, let me start off by letting your listeners understand that Sheriff Arpaio and I had a very long discussion a couple months back, and unfortunately the sheriff tripped over some uneven sidewalk in Phoenix and actually broke his shoulder.
Yeah.
So he's out of the game here for a little bit, but he should be back up and running in a week or so. But he has given me the authority to do whatever I need to do to advance the issue, and he has also pledged his full weight and support behind it. Without going into too much detail, I can tell you what we're planning to do is make various appointments and presentations to very important people throughout the nation. I mean, if you just look at the map, there's about 25 red states.
Yeah.
There are people that we want to go see, people we are trying to get meetings with, trying to get the truth out there. You have to understand something else. No one has seen our book of evidence.
That's right. No one knows what you and I know. And what
they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. If they did see it, they would have a responsibility to act on it.
Yeah.
So we're going to bring it.
Yep.
And we're going to do whatever we can. So the sheriff has given me the authorization to do that. The problem, as you said, is we don't receive taxpayer funding. The sheriff's office cannot pay for any of this. That was the genius behind Sheriff Arpaio, you doing this way. Because if you were paying taxpayer money on this, they'd be looking to lynch him from the nearest street post.
Yeah, yeah. You got 30 seconds, Mike.
What we need to do is we need to solicit for donations, $10, $15, one-time donation. If every listener on your radio show gave us 10 or 15 bucks,
yeah,
that would give us enough money, more than enough money, to, I believe, really start to move mountains in this.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, Mike. And thank you. Listen, next week we'll have an hour and a half. That's Lieutenant Mike Zullo. You get ready to call in next week. Go to carlgallops.com and /Obama. carlgallops.com /Obama. It will redirect you immediately to the Maricopa County Cold Case Posse website where you can click the the donate button and give. Okay? Lieutenant Mike Zullo, next week, an hour and a half. Tell people, even people that think this is a bunch of junk, tell them, call them. Tell them to call up and talk to Lieutenant Mike. In the meantime, you have been listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops. Mallory Bardwell, your world-famous producer. God bless you. God bless America.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.